included in our public notices. I note that we have 7 out of 7 commissioners here, so we do have a quorum. Before Brandon makes his announcement, I would like to say that I got an email from the Oregon Government Ethics Commission, and it is about the filing that we all need to do some in April.
Oh,
Did you all get this?
no, you had me concerned. Maybe they caught up with you or something.
Okay, so maybe Brandon, we can ask Brandon to get everybody registered with them, or whatever you
through
do.
the city recorder.
Okay.
That the city recorder will be sending out notice, but I also noticed on that finding that after March 15th, they will send notice to all registered members. So if you're not registered, reach out to the city recorder right now to ensure that you get a copy of it.
How would we know if we were registered or not?
If you haven't received an email from the state,
Let's assume you would have gotten one of these.
it wouldn't hurt to contact the city recorder in any event and let them know that you'd like to receive a copy of it.
This is the $50 a day thing.
Yeah, I got penalized $50 a week or something last year for that. So
I think I got it and threw it away.
it goes in your junk mail, by the way, too. So.
That's probably a good place to look for it. Okay, you've been warned. Okay, Brandon.
So a couple announcements. The state of Oregon legislation 1537 passed, and I believe is on the governor's desk for signature. The reason I bring it up is there's numerous housing-related provisions within that Senate bill, and will likely be impacting City of Ashland. So we'll bring that forward as part of a legislative update. Most notably, it identified that there's the opportunity for applicants to request exceptions to existing standards for the promotion of additional housing that must be granted by municipalities. So we've got to look into that a little bit further and see how that will apply to planning applications in Ashland. Additionally, there's a provision within that bill that allows for cities of our size to expand the urban growth boundary into urban reserve areas to by up to 50 acres in order to provide additional housing opportunities where at least 30% of the units provided are affordable under that provision. And cities larger than ours up to 100 acres. I also wanted to note on a separate subject, on May 18th, the Historic Preservation Advisory Committee is going to be providing their historic awards. It's going to be in Railroad Park from 10 to 2. We have a lot of time between now and then, so I'll remind you later, but you'd all be welcome to attend. It would include tours as well as ribbon cutting for the MAP project, which is the medallions that are located throughout the railroad district. I also wanted to note that this may be one of the last times in this room where we're with the existing audio-video equipment. The city is upgrading all of the facilities in this room the week of March 20th through March 29th. And so there may be limited disruption there because my understanding is that they can pack up shop and make accommodation for study sessions and regular meetings during that time. And speaking of study sessions, the next upcoming study session on March 21st corresponds with spring break. We had initially requested that Scott Fleury and the Transportation Advisory Committee come to that meeting for an update in terms of the transportation element and the transportation system plan. However, it's anticipated that they would likely be able to come on April 23rd. And we are going to be reaching out to the Climate and
Environmental Policy Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Derek. CPAC to see if they may also want to come maybe on May 28th to present to this commission regarding their activities and the implications of the Climate Energy Action Plan progress. So that does leave March 21st as a study session coming right up that we don't have items.
26th.
March 26th, thank you. Study session that we don't have items fully fleshed out. One, we could come to you and discuss the CFA scope of work, the climate friendly and area. We met for the first time with the consultants that were selected by DLCD, being 3J and Echo Northwest, yesterday for our kickoff meeting, and we're going to begin the scope of work in the near term. We could also, by Tuesday after next, do a little deeper dive into Senate Bill 1537 and come back with an update on that. Typically, we would wait for the full legislative update until after League of Oregon Cities and other organizations have done that work and provide that information to you, which may not be available as early as 2 weeks from today. So those are a couple available topics if the commission chooses to meet for a study session on the 26th. And I guess the last comment I will make is appointments for this commission, as all advisory commissions, for those terms that are expiring, expire on April 30th. And so if you're interested in re-upping for this commission, if your term is expiring, again, please contact the city recorder with a letter requesting to be reappointed. That's my hope. And then that would be forwarded to the mayor for consideration and appointments. And with that, also the first meeting in April, we will be in a position to have election of chair, which is an annual process. So
I thought we did that after the terms were decided. So it would be the
the first meeting in May.
Yeah,
Yeah, so it'd be the new people.
That would work.
okay.
If they're new.
And that's all I have for updates.
Okay, so do you want us to make a decision now about the study session on the 26th?
I mean, we're all present, so if you guys do have recommendations in that regard.
Okay,
So,
I won't be here.
you won't be here, okay. I won't be here. That's two that won't be here.
That's for the study session?
Yeah, the 26th.
I'll be here. I want to hear about the Senate bill. I want you guys to figure that all out. It's going to be horrific, it sounds like. To me.
it has a lot in it. All right, so
26,
So generally, the consensus is we should go ahead and meet and ask staff to see what they can do in terms of researching HB 1537. Okay. You have your marching orders.
do.
That would work.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's move on. The consent agenda, approval of minutes for February 13th, regular meeting. Anybody want to make a motion?
I will move for approval of the minutes from that meeting.
Okay. Second. Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, they are adopted. Next is public forum, and I don't see anybody in the audience that would be under public forum, so we're going to skip that. We'll move on to our Type 2 public hearing. With Type 2 hearings, decisions are made by the Planning Commission after a public hearing, and the decision may be appealed to the City Council. This is Planning Action PA-T2-2024-00046, and it's an application for an outline and final plan approval for a 5-lot performance standards subdivision with 4 residential lots and 1 common lot for the property located at 210 Alicia Avenue. Included are an application for a variance to allow private driveway to serve 4 lots, and exception to street standards due to the existing unimproved street, and a tree removal request. The comprehensive plan designation is single family. The zoning is R1-5 and PSO overlay. Assessor's map is 39-1E-04-DB, and the tax lot is 1700. Before we begin the public hearing, I will ask commissioners if they have had any ex parte contact or done any site visits. Commissioner Herron?
No ex parte, no site visit.
Commissioner McCracken, Jan, sorry.
No ex parte, site visit.
Commissioner Kincairn?
Site visit, no ex parte.
Commissioner Nauer?
No ex parte, 2 seconds.
Oh.
I didn't get the note.
Commissioner Perkinson?
No ex parte. Site visit, yes.
And Commissioner Phillips?
No ex parte, yes, site visit.
Okay, and myself, no ex parte and yes on a site visit. I'm not aware of any challenges for bias or prejudgment or personal interest, so I will therefore open the public hearing. Alan, you want to go for it?
Planning Commission, pleasure to be before you again this evening. My name is Aaron Anderson. I'm a senior planner on staff here. And as you just outlined, this is a request for an outline and final plan 5-lot subdivision with 4 residential lots and 1 lot reserved for a common area. The exception to the street standards and the variance are both tied together based on our requirements for public street dedications. And there's also a request to remove a single tree. This is the overall location of the property. It is to the east of Oak Street. And just to the north of this is a project that is very similar to this one, which you reviewed about 2 months ago, 822 Oak. And as we go through this application, you'll notice that there's a great deal of similarities. This is the neighborhood with showing the subject property in the lower right. The neighborhood was originally developed in 1965 as the Oak Court subdivision, and you'll note that there was no property to the south of it when it was initially platted. In 1970, that property was platted, and you can see the creation of the subject property in the lower right-hand corner. This is the time where the 46 feet of frontage was created. Since that time, in 1990, it went through this property line adjustment, and then again in 2009, and then in 2015, which brought us to the configuration that the neighborhood is in today. So this shows the entire neighborhood along with that narrow frontage there. This is an aerial overhead from a new program that we've gotten with Nearmap. It provides really high-resolution aerial imagery over time series, and you can see that the existing house is there near the roadway. And that photo, by the way, is June 22. This is a performance standard subdivision. It is in the performance standard overlay, and so it is required to be processed under this chapter, whether or not it takes advantage of those performance standards. This is the proposed subdivision. You can see the 3 lots running from top to bottom. Lots 1, 2, and 3 with lot 4 in the southwest corner. And then the 5th lot is the area that's hatched, which provides common area and vehicle access to all of the lots. The density for this zone under performance standards is 4.5 lots per acre. That provides a base density of 5.6 for this lot, and there are no density bonuses being requested in the proposing 4 lots. This shows the building envelope exhibit that was provided. We'll be talking this a little further as we get to approval criteria 3, and we discuss the trees that are shown there in the middle of lot 2. The applicant included a detailed response to all of the approval criteria. These are the 8 major items for outline plan. And really the 2 approval criteria that staff focused on, the staff report is the 3rd one and the 7th one, and I'll similarly follow that in this presentation. The 3rd criterion requires that natural features such as wetlands, large trees are included in the unbuildable areas. So here we'll discuss the nature of a wetland that was identified as a possible wetland in the 2020 approval. The code identifies 2 different types of wetlands, those that are known and are in our inventory, and those that are possible wetlands. So during the 2020 approval, there was a possible wetland that was then delineated. The condition of approval by the Planning Commission in that 2020 approval required that if the DSL found that wetland to be jurisdictional, that then the standards of 18.3.11 should apply. The wetland was delineated. The DSL issued a concurrence. This is a brief excerpt from that concurrence, which basically states that the wetland and the ditch are both exempt for those references that are listed here. This is the map that was an exhibit to that DSL delineation, and you can see the subject property with the irrigated pipe going through the central part of the property and the outfall to the wetland, and this identified that the subject property had about 1,300 square feet of wetland. In terms of boiling down the arguments in favor or against of regulating 18.311, the DSL makes clear in their delineation that local regulations may indeed apply, and there's no language in the land use code that says that if the DSL finds that it's exempt, it should be exempt from local regulations. On the other hand, it is artificially created, and the applicant has been clear that they're intending on piping the water to the adjacent property. In staff's final analysis, as was outlined in the staff report, we believe that the Commission can and should determine that the wetland is not subject to the regulation under AMC 311 for the foregoing reasons. With regards to trees, the site plan indicated 2 20-inch willows, a 10-inch willow, an 8-inch willow, and a 10-inch walnut. When I walked the property yesterday, I don't believe that I saw the 20-inch willows, so the question that I would have is whether they are actually present. That said, the argument the applicant's going to raise is that the code has a definition for significant trees and does not define large trees. And so I'll leave that to the applicant to bring to you. As presently written in the staff report, there's a condition of approval that the building envelope for that second lot be modified so that those trees that have been identified would not be in the buildable area. With regards to the seventh criterion, a typical neighborhood street is shown as a section here and exists in a right-of-way that's between 50 and 55 feet wide. And as we mentioned, the frontage is 46.9 feet. And typically, a subdivision requires that when there's 4 lots, that a public road be dedicated. It's from that standard that we understand that a private drive is limited to 3 lots, because if there's 4 lots, it requires the dedication. So the variance here is a request to allow 4 lots to be accessed off of a single private drive rather than dedicating a public street. And what comes hand in hand with that is an exception to the street standards. And as we discussed on site, there could be the possibility to create a driveway approach and have 2 very short stubs of sidewalk, but they wouldn't connect to anything. And when considering the extant development of the right-of-way and the existing approach, both the variance and the exception seem reasonable. Finally, the application requests a single tree to be removed. That is the plum that is shown here in the driveway. The shed that is also shown there will be removed. This was reviewed at the last Tree Management Advisory Committee, and they unanimously agreed that the tree was near the end of its life and recommended approval of the request to remove it. Finally, staff recommends approval with the conditions that are in the staff report, and I'm more than happy to take any questions that you may have.
I'd like to clarify something. So you said you didn't see the willow trees on site yesterday. Did you see trees that were of the size the willows were purported to be?
What I saw on site where the wetland area was, I believe, identified as a cottonwood by the applicant. I personally didn't see any 20-inch large willows, but I'll ask the applicant to speak to that further.
Okay, and did you see any 20-inch trees of any variety?
Not where the 20-inch willows are identified near the wetland, no.
Okay.
So, Madam Chair, I appreciate
Sure.
you asking that question. I had a similar question or observation. Walking the site yesterday, I didn't see a 20-inch willow, and if our observation that those trees are not existing as depicted on the graphic, if that's true, it might cause us to amend line item 2 under the conclusions and recommendations, which would reasonably suggest that the removal of non-significant trees with the mitigation would be appropriate.
So I'm sorry, I wasn't listening for a moment because I was answering a question. The trees that are on site that are being identified as the 2 larger willows are actually 2 stems of a dead cottonwood.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Yeah.
And then there's also another 20-inch tree in the area that's purported to be the wetland.
That's what I'm talking about. These are in the wetlands.
Okay, but I thought there were three trees.
The two trees that are next to each other that are identified as large, I believe, are not two 20-inch willows, but are two stems of cottonwood that are dead.
Okay, and those are the two
I think so.
Or
You know, it's like
ones at the
it's,
bottom of the page?
all I know is that I didn't see any 20-inch willows.
Okay.
And I
okay.
saw two big cottonwood trunks that are
Dead.
full of mushrooms.
Okay.
So,
And then the 8-inch willow is probably the cottonwood
No,
that
no,
was in
no.
the wetland.
well, there are a bunch of larger willows. Did you see a cottonwood that was down there?
Well, I think that's what we were talking about yesterday. That scrawny, as a non-expert, I'm going to call it a scrawny tree in the wetlands, which we talked about. Is that a willow or a cottonwood? And I thought there was some discussion about that scrawny tree being a cottonwood.
So, I'm going to be out of order probably, but when the water is changed over and re-piped, those are no longer going to be trees that matter.
Okay. That's good clarification. So, okay, I'll ask my question later. Russell?
Well, and then what about the walnut tree? Because there's supposedly a walnut tree down there too.
Yeah, there's a walnut tree down at the property line.
I believe this is the walnut tree here with the laser pointers.
It's not a significant tree. It's,
And that would probably be out of the building area anyway.
yeah,
Seems likely.
and it's not in the wetland area.
Okay. Any other questions for Aaron?
I think two of mine are for Aaron rather than the applicant. Maybe you tell me if applicant
Sure.
would be better to address these. But in the map of the proposed change with the new layouts and the subdivision of the property, it talks about, and it states on the document that it's moving the Million Ditch easement over to the line between, I believe it's properties 2 and 3. There seems to be some lack of clarity as to whether or not there's even an easement involved in this situation. Do we know? Is it an easement? And if so, has there been a quick claim on the existing one so that it can be moved?
Sure. So the city is not a keeper of all easement information. We would need a title report to know that. I haven't seen a survey that has indicated that there is an existing easement for the ditch. I know they're planning on dedicating a new easement for the relocated, but as far as whether there's an easement encumbering the present path of the irrigation ditch, you need to ask the applicant.
Okay. Second one was building out the planned driveway. There was just a comment that was made, and this is probably my just lack of knowledge on this, that the private driveway would nonetheless be dedicated as fire apparatus access. Why is that being called out specifically? Is there a reason?
Are you quoting from the applicant's materials?
I'm quoting from, the material that you summarized from applicant.
What you just quoted, is that in the staff report or in the applicant's materials?
Staff report.
Okay.
Staff report, page 7. Applicant explains that the requested variance to allow a private driveway to serve 4 lots instead of 3 is the minimum necessary, and emphasizes that the private driveway would be dedicated as fire apparatus access. I would think that would be expected. Is there any particular call out there that's unusual?
No, in fact, I imagine I may have been quoting from the applicant's materials, but they are dedicating that as a fire apparatus turnaround. So it will be available for the fire truck turnaround.
I guess what I was just trying to sort out was the use of the word dedicated, meaning something different than merely the construction of this
Yeah, it needs to.
road.
All easements are dedicated.
Yeah, so subsequent to the construction of it and as part of the plat, they would have to dedicate it as a fire apparatus access easement to the benefit of the city, so the city fire truck can use that without restriction.
Okay.
And keep it clear at all times.
Correct.
Build it to specs.
Yeah.
Right. That's it for me.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And we have a speaker request form from Amy Gunter.
Thank you. Can I use your pointer? The laser pointer? Oh, you just use the screen? Got it.
Does the applicant have to fill out a speaker request form?
They do, yes.
She just wanted to make sure she got in.
Okay. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Amy Gunter, Road Planning and Development Services. Do you need my address? No? Okay. Thank you for your time this evening. Thank you for the comprehensive staff report and presentation. Not going to go through all the details of the location of the property since Aaron did cover that. Did want to note, if some folks were familiar with the site, it was because there was a 12-unit, 13-lot cottage housing development using the same driveway configuration and the same street exceptions approved in 2020. This shows the blue hashed overlay is the performance standards overlay. All of the yellow properties are zoned single-family residential R15. And the P overlay, they're all generally developed with residential homes and accessory structures. Okay, the proposal is for outline and final plan development of 5-lot residential subdivision. It is, as Aaron noted, required to be processed under AMC 18.3.9 for performance standards. Here's the variance request, the number of lots accessed off of a private driveway, and an exception to street standards to not improve frontage improvements to city street standards, which includes curb, gutter, sidewalk, park row, for approximately 18 feet of frontage, which is what's remaining after. The layout of this subdivision, the variance, and the exceptions are based on a number of factors, primarily on the physical characteristics of the property, its minimal street frontage, the existing street patterns, the limitation of development of adjacent properties. The property to the south actually has a conservation easement that prevents further development, and the property to the east, as you saw, is down a steep hill and has all sorts of natural features that limit its development potential. The property that has the conservation easement is off the map, but it's this property down here. There's a tree removal permit to remove the one 20-inch plum tree, and then all the other trees on the property are less than the regulatory sizes found in the Ashland Land Development Ordinance. Okay, the property is to be accessed via a shared driveway. All driveways that are greater than 50 feet in length become flagged drives. Flagged drives are fire apparatus access lanes, and as such are dedicated as such. And only 3 residential lots are allowed to be accessed via a private drive through the performance standards option subdivision. You can't do it through a partition. You could only divide 3 flag lots or something like that, but essentially anything more than 2 lots off of a private drive requires a subdivision. So that's where we are tonight. The proposed private driveway will provide limited access to 4 residential lots. There are low numbers of vehicle strips generated by 4 residential lots, and the private driveway does not substantially impact the existing neighborhood street pattern, development pattern, driveway spacing on Alicia Street and Sylvia Street, Alicia Avenue and Sylvia Street, that a public street would. The proposed driveway includes a screening fence along the property line, surface parking for the 4 required on-street or in the common area parking spaces for performance standard subdivisions, even after all the CFAC rules go into effect. That's how my understanding of how the code it shakes out. So there are 4 lots on a common area within 200 feet of the proposed homes. And so that meets that parking standard. The Driveway, again, turns into that fire apparatus access hammerhead, and the layout of these lots is due to that lack of public street frontage and connectivity beyond the boundaries of the property. Each lot complies with minimum lot areas in the zone and exceeds them, in fact. Each lot complies with the minimum north-south lot dimensions for the solar access ordinance. The lots have substantial buildable areas within the building envelopes. As noted, Lot 2 has, right now, the easement that runs across the property is a non-prescriptive easement, or non-descriptive easement. It's just an easement for the transportation of the million ditch irrigation waters. So the agreement has been made between the adjacent property owner, the end user of that irrigation water, and this property owner as to where that irrigation line will be relocated to. Within the building envelope of that Lot 2, there are trees, and I'll talk about the trees more specifically and why there were some 20-inch trees identified. But in particular, there's the 2 stems of either poplar or cottonwood. They were called out as willows. And then the walnut tree that is at a severe lean. But none of these trees are large and don't meet the preservation standards or removal standards from the Ashland Land Use Ordinance, and therefore no connection to the code to preserve them as natural features was how I essentially addressed that finding. So again, all the lots exceed the minimum lot areas. Lot 5 is effectively an easement area for the driveways, parking areas, and all of the utilities that extend from Alicia Street into the property. Okay. And I'm sorry, I keep saying Alicia Street when it's Alicia Avenue, but almost every map has it labeled differently. So that's why I go back and forth between the 2 descriptions. So they're both classified as neighborhood streets. Aaron went through that they require at least a minimum 47-foot wide dedicated right-of-way, which would be a substantial change in the neighborhood development pattern that's out there. Additionally, new streets are required to be improved with asphalt travel lanes, curb, gutter, landscape, park row, street trees, and sidewalks. And that entire street network from Oak Street, Oak Lawn, Alicia, and Sylvia are all non-conforming. There are existing utilities within the public rights-of-way, and on the preliminary utility map, no concerns were raised that there's not adequate infrastructure. Staff went through the 2020 decision because there were some discussions about that. So they went through those in this finding, and essentially it's in line with what our engineers have found. So let's get to the most important part of this stuff. So the variance is the fairly self-explanatory as to why a variance is requested. It's for the 4 lots. There's a number of off-site reasons why a street could not go through to adjacent properties, either to the east or to the south or to the west, back towards Oak Street. The Public Works Department has expressed not really being interested in having only 4 lots on a fully public street that would go to nowhere. And then additionally, it helps preserve some of the existing lot layout. For example, the garage on that house would have to come down, setbacks wouldn't be met, neighborhood setbacks potentially wouldn't be met, you would have spacing issues between driveways, all of these sort of ramifications that happen with public street dedications that don't happen with sort of a consisting driveway that will be used in the same manner. Okay, so this slide focuses on, in particular, 18.3.9040 A3C, and I underlined the 2 sort of natural features that the code calls out to be identified on the plan, and then that the significant features have been included in the open space, common areas, and unbuildable areas. So the performance standards overlay was created to distinguish between those areas that have been developed under the subdivision code and those which are undeveloped due to the nature of the property, adjacent developments, if they're vacant, where the topography is, vegetation, natural hazards, that sort of thing. In this case, there's a no option not to use the performance standards option. So the criteria on the screen finds that wetlands and large trees should be identified on the plan, and that significant features should be included in the open space, common areas, and unbuildable areas. There is only one natural feature on this property that meets the definition of a significant natural feature, and that is that 20-inch plum tree. That plum tree is within the driving surface area, and additionally, that type of plum tree has exceeded its average lifespan, and its location and removal and mitigation is a better alternative than preservation within the subdivision. The other natural features are not natural. In fact, they're artificially created by an controlled, like manually controlled, unpiped historic irrigation waters. On page 6 of the staff report, it's noted that staff feels the Planning Commission needs to find that the approval criteria to be met, a significant natural feature must be on the site or be created through the preservation of large trees. Just because it's in the performance standards overlay doesn't mean there's a natural feature that's significant other than the one plum tree. So it seeks to keep those significant natural features within the open spaces and unbuildable areas, common areas. There are no common areas, open spaces, and arguably there's no unbuildable areas because there are no jurisdictional wetlands, as Aaron went through the state wetland delineation and their concurrence that those were artificially created. The irrigation water that creates this natural area that is not usable by this property. It has to be, it can't be used by this property. They do not have a water right to it. And so when it gets piped, that natural feature essentially will go away and move to wherever the new pipe outfall is. And then specifically, the municipal code defines when trees are subject to tree removal permits, when trees should be protected, and what a tree is. So the reason why there were some 20-inch trees is that the code talks about stump sprouts and multiple sprouts where they come out of the ground. And so those willow trees, you're not seeing a 20-inch tree. You're seeing 50 sprouts that created these 20-inch clumps of trees. And so those trees are continuously, they were mowed by the previous owners, what I believe happened. And then there was a 36-inch tree that was removed under an emergency tree removal permit. That was in that area. You probably saw that stump. It was a willow tree. So that's how those 20-inch trees came up, is that AMC 18.6.1.030 defines a woody plant as having a 6-inch caliper in diameter breast height trunk, or it goes on to describes how you call multiple stems. Then it talks about what a significant tree is. A significant tree is a conifer with an 18-inch caliper trunk in diameter breast height, or a deciduous tree with a 12-inch caliper, 12-inch in diameter breast height trunk. 18.57 talks, that's the tree removal chapter. It talks about when tree removal permits are required. In this case, the 3 trees in this picture would not be subject to tree removal permits. Because they are below those sizes in the code. And the trees are there specifically because of this irrigation. The walnut tree, that's this guy here, his stump actually starts way back here. He's at a significant lean due to the weight of those blackberries. That's just perseverance of this little tree pushed up through these blackberries. So it's not a healthy tree. It's got about an 8-foot parallel stump in before it goes up and becomes branched out. So the condition, the trees are also in a poor state of health. They have brittle branches. It was hard to hang flagging tape on it. They kept breaking. There were mushrooms. They've been topped. They're in poor condition. That walnut tree has 8-foot trunk parallel to the ground because of the weight of the blackberries. So for this reason, the applicant believes that condition number 2, referring to preservation of significant features, should be removed because it's based on, because we should stick to the codified definition of what a tree is, what tree protection is, and when tree removal permits are necessary. And these, I'm air quoting, large trees, as identified by staff, don't meet those thresholds and are not subject to the protection standards in the code, and we shouldn't be creating new rules. To address the Million irrigation ditch, it extends from its diversion point near about 71 Water Street, and it flows downhill, goes under the tracks, follows Oak Street, splits and goes into the Jessica Lane area, and then this is the subject property. The map here is one of the early 2000 layouts, but essentially this is the subject property here, and then this is the end user. There are 12.89 acres of irrigated area. There's numerous various users. There's only 3 areas listed actually in the water right, but because of all the divisions of the land over time, there's been a lot of different splits in those water rights. But the end users, the adjacent properties from this site, will be the recipients of the irrigation water. So the tight line for irrigation cannot occur during the irrigation season. They have a very short window of time when they can actually put the pipe in, and they cannot interrupt the service for the users. The relocation of that, there was a pipe section that was on the maps that would cut through the property. That was piped to now what you see popping out the hill there. So this irrigation water created an artificial wetland that is not regulated by the state. They found that in that wetland delineation report 2021-025, which is in the packet. And then, as I stated, it's in the existing easement is non-specific. The street standards exception, I feel Aaron went through the conditions, but essentially this is the property line, and then the fence is just a few feet beyond it. The turning radii of the driveway will start it at about 5 feet off the property line. That's where the utilities, 5 to 7 feet, that's where the utilities will go. And then over here is where there's just a tiny little bit of frontage, maybe 18 feet, where the exception is requested for. Trying to finish up. So the circumstances for both the variance request and the exception are generated from situations beyond the property owner's control, such as existing layout, existing development patterns, existing frontage, that there are circumstances that it's the minimum necessary to achieve a development and address existing public, pedestrian, bicycle, and automobile transportation system, which will not be negatively impacted by this proposed development. And in conclusion, it can be found that the Ash Meadows subdivision outline plan application demonstrates substantial compliance with the performance standards subdivision approval criteria, the number of lots, the density, the layout, the public infrastructure improvements all substantially conform to the City of Ashland standards. The exception to street standards for Alicia Avenue and not providing 18 feet of improvements and the variance to public street dedication all are justified with the findings and the statements within this hearing and demonstrate substantial compliance with the purpose and intent of the PSO overlay. The tree removal standards, the street standards, and the standards for approval of a variance. Additionally, the proposal and associated request furthers the goal and policies of the comprehensive plan, including the goals and policies of the housing element, which recognizes that land is a limited resource, that land should be conserved and reduced. The impact to the land should be reduced by creation of limited street widths to accommodate traffic and in order to reduce aesthetic impacts. Consistent with policies related to growth and form, the city should allow and encourage the development of available lots within the urban area while providing sufficient new land to avoid undue increase in land costs. And additionally, the urbanization chapter, which is that the goal of the city is to maintain a compact urban form and include an adequate supply of land within the city to not hinder the natural market forces within the city and ensure an orderly and sequential development of land within the city. So we believe that this can address this comprehensive plan policy from urbanization, economic development, the housing element, meets the performance standards, subdivision criteria, exception request, and variance request. If you have any questions, I am finished.
Any commissioners have any questions?
Beat you to it.
Commissioner Kincairn?
Yeah, just, there's, I just have a question about the fire lane and
Yeah.
parking. So How wide is that driveway coming on? There's no dimensions on any of these plans.
So the dedicated width of it will be 27 feet for the majority of the distance. That allows for the utilities. Let me go back to the slide.
So let me just be specific what my question is.
Yeah.
You talked about parking for 4 vehicles, parallel parking on that drive, plus a fire lane.
Correct.
So how do you stripe for no parking in fire lane and have 4 parallel parking places?
In my discussion with the fire marshal, Mark Shea? Thank you. In my discussion with the fire marshal, Shea, his concern is that he needs 20 feet of clear width.
Right.
And so we are providing the 7 foot of parking and then a 15-foot paved width, but overall 27 feet of clear width.
So that requires a 7-foot parallel parking person to be hanging out over the asphalt.
There will be, so the asphalt notches over, so there's, on the screen, these are all the water meters here.
Yeah.
And then the asphalt notches and provides these 4.
Way up against the fence, there's no buffer?
There's no buffer, and that is supported in the code. I'll find the exact section, but the buffer section specifically is found in the site review section, and it speaks to in the multifamily zone, commercial zone, employment zones. It does not speak to a buffer in the single-family residential zone. So there's a 6-foot fence, the parking area, the driving surface.
So if it was multifamily, there'd be a 5-foot buffer there.
Commercial, employment.
And I'm not trying to cause trouble, but the variance is what's allowing, variance to the access is what's allowing that driveway to happen. Is there any other place to put 4 parking places other than up against that property line?
Not without them being like, not on a common area. So 18.3.9. Sorry, print out your guys' ordinance around.
No, I don't need you to do that.
Yeah, so in order to meet that standard, it has to be on common area. We would love to provide 1 additional parking space on each lot, but that's not allowed, and this has been quite adjudicated a la Grandview Terrace, and I am uncomfortable saying that it could be anywhere else because it has to be in a common area.
But the common area is defined by the proposer.
Right, so in theory, we could just put like a wing out of common area to move it, but that doesn't seem...
So the only reason I'm going here, maybe I don't have, I have no idea, and I'm not trying to just be a problem person, but variances, to me, usually mean that they're, you're granting something, it's the opportunity for us to get fussy. Easy way to put it. And I see that driveway as a severe negative impact to the property owner to the west. And I'm surprised that I was reading the plans differently. I thought there was actually like a landscape buffer there.
If it was a public street, there would be curb, most likely.
Up against the fence?
Maybe not. There would be, I guess, sidewalk abutting a fence.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I kind of, and I didn't see it before tonight, and I'm sorry that I didn't see it earlier, but I actually can't really support it the way it's shown. Yeah.
So let's have some comment from staff.
Yeah, so a couple things come to play. One, the city changed our parking standards, 18.39.060 parking standards. So the applicant's reference to Grand Street Terrace, the code has changed since that period in terms of when on-street parking is required. It stipulates that for all performance standard subdivision in R1, ... which create or improve city streets, at least one on-street parking space per proposed lot shall be provided with the following exceptions. One, I would say that this project does not create a new city street. It's asking for a private driveway. Further, even in cases where a city street is required, one on-street parking is provided on newly created or improved streets. The total number of on-street spaces required should not surpass the available street frontage, with the parking space being considered equivalent to 22 feet in length. So in the case of improvements to Alicia, you're looking at that frontage as a public street. And further, that conforms with the on-street parking standards under Section B, where on-street parking spaces shall be immediately adjacent to the public right-of-way or on publicly association-owned land and directly accessible from the public right-of-way, which I believe is what you're referencing.
Yeah.
But I believe that the Planning Commission can make a determination that this application is, for all purposes, is not creating a new public street, and as such would not be required to provide one parking space per lot.
Mine, then get rid of the parking places parallel
That's why
to that
I'm bringing
lot
it
line.
forward
Yeah.
for your consideration.
I just,
There will then naturally be a landscape buffer there, because there's utilities.
And if the commission wanted to propose that, it may be something that would be suitable as a condition of approval, so that it could be clarified in the findings.
you just said that there can't be a landscape buffer there because there's utilities?
There would be.
Past the utilities,
Okay.
that will sort of naturally become a space where landscaping could be, or at least there wouldn't be vehicles parked there. There would be the fence, gravel, driveway, but it would be labeled fire apparatus access, no parking at that point.
So I'm just, so the whole thought is, okay, so there's going to be some mitigation trees planted. Yeah.
So what you're looking for is a landscape buffer along the western property line?
I am. I'm saying, okay, well, it's a variance, you don't have to put it in a public street. If it was a public street, there'd be a sidewalk and a park row, so it's like, what, I want to mitigate the impact to the neighborhood.
Yeah.
That's what I'm after. And, yeah, that's all. So, I don't know if I have a right to do that or not, but that's what's bothering me.
I think you do.
I think that it creates a cleaner entry, and I think from a fire protection perspective, less risk of there being a vehicle in the way of a fire response by not having 4 dedicated parking spots. So I think creating a buffer is a win-win in that regard. I think it's better for the neighbor, and I think it's better for the fire department.
Why, so as a outline plan and final plan, there's no landscaping plan required for this application?
There would be a landscaping plan required. Aaron, can you speak to, for a subdivision of?
There typically would be, because there's typically streets, there's typically open spaces with subdivisions. There are not those here.
I just think, you know, it's a non-typical situation, and I would like to see it honoring what those typical situations are trying to do, which is to create safety and beauty and lack of, and create some kind of, I lost my word, where it's not such a huge impact. So I get it, why it's like this. And But I don't think just because it's atypical and a variance that it means that you don't have to take care of those things. So I'm not saying you guys did anything wrong by not doing it, but it's okay. I just want to condition the hell out of it.
Okay.
Okay, I'm done.
Thank you very much. Susan?
So you talked about 27 feet wide, but if there were cars parked along there, how much of that 27 feet would they consume?
7 feet,
Literally to the door of the car.
literally to the door of the car. Yep.
So practically speaking, more than 7 feet, because you don't want to hit the car. Correct?
And because the fence is there.
27 feet is, no, but no,
They're
I mean,
typically
if you are
they're
driving.
typically 8 feet wide.
Yeah, if
parking
you're
stall.
driving on the driveway, you would be at least a foot further in from the 7 feet if the car parks in its space. And my point is that it squeezes the space, I believe, to have cars there. My other question is, would there be a curb between, so what's to prevent people from running into the fence on a regular basis? Just good parking skills?
It's fairly common to have paved parking spaces against fences and other immobile objects. It's up to the driver to be responsible, not hit the fence. Maybe if they have a passenger, let that passenger out on the driving surface, that sort of thing. But I believe, as staff described, those parking spaces are not necessary by code, so we would eliminate them. We're merely providing them to address code, but there's ample area on each site to have its own, like, third visitor parking space, which used to be a standard. So in addition to these, there potentially would have been an additional parking space on each lot. Since parking rules have changed, that's not a criteria anymore. But there's ample room on these properties where people could park and their guests could park. Yeah.
Well,
It would be entertained.
And I think given, I'm just trying to synthesize the discussion, which I think is a great discussion. So given what I heard Brandon read as a clarification of what's in the code currently, the 4 parking spaces as proposed are not required. And given the concern related to the neighbor, creating a buffer, and your concern, which is valid, that that's just an awkward and tight way to park for vehicles potentially, I go back to my comment, it's a win-win to remove those 4 parking spaces and create a buffer on the fence.
Okay, so before we negotiate
Are we
this
getting into
totally, yeah,
discussion?
we're getting
Yeah.
into discussion. So let's see if there's any other questions directly for Amy.
Yeah.
And,
Yes.
okay, and we'll continue with the public hearing. Mr. Nauer.
Combination Amy and staff, handling of the stormwater on the property is being done how? You didn't mention it in your presentation.
So there is an engineered system, which essentially everybody has to, since there'll be more than 2,500 square feet of new impervious surfaces, there has to be on-site retention and detention. I believe that there's over 10,000 square feet potential total, so that means there has to be retention, detention, and treatment. So each property will have their own sort of rain garden features that are allowed under the Oregon Building Code for how to deal with storm drainage. And then in addition, there was a common facility that was proposed. There's a condition of approval that speaks to a building department policy and how those things are addressed at building permit, but essentially there's a common facility here, and then everything was proposed to be detained, retained, treated, and then outflow here. And the property owner, builder, his engineer are trying to set up an appointment with the building official to go over what he expects for how to address building permit policy 2000-something, 9. It's in the conditions of approval. So
Are you speaking about the property owner to the east where this stormwater might potentially be exiting?
So how water is currently addressed under the Rogue Valley Stormwater Quality Design Manual is that whatever flows off of this site is no more than what is already flowing off of this site.
Agreed.
So there's no greater impact to adjacent property owners than what is currently happening. And so that is why this sort of system has been approved and used throughout the city and other subdivisions.
Okay. I believe 6D on the planned approval or not approval of this says that stormwater is being evacuated to curb. Did I misread that?
No, you,
No, you didn't. That is,
It's an or.
Or?
So it says curb, gutter, public storm pipe, approved public drainage way, or through an approved alternative.
Okay.
So it doesn't stop it, it has to be to the
So we're
curb.
coming under the or on that
Yeah.
one.
thank you.
Didn't mean to throw you a curveball.
No, not at all. Truthfully, a lot of the conditions of approval get used from boilerplate, and so the,
That's what I wondered. And just to throw a little more English on the ball here for our discussion about the driveway. One of the things that I was wondering about is that the length of the driveway is not terribly long, but it's long enough. And as we have more and more conversations about a walkable Ashland, putting people into a driveway to exit the property troubles me. And I was wondering if we're talking about putting a buffer with the neighbor, are we also potentially talking about maybe a sidewalk or at least a space that cannot be easily accessed by an automobile or anything else as someone is entering or exiting this property?
Nothing other than a shared driveway for all users was considered, similar to like the
I
shared street.
understand that, but that's
and-
not my question.
Right, and so there is room outside of the driving surface, but there's not like a separated surface, and that's primarily because of the low number of dwelling units here and the low number of people that will be traversing there and the limited conflicts between potential pedestrians and people in this subdivision. So there was not, similar to like a flag drive, private drive, there is not a separate pedestrian access
I understand
required
that-
or proposed.
I understand that it was not considered.
Right.
I'm considering the UPS guy barreling down the driveway in order to drop off some package and a child of a family that is living in one of these houses trying to go down that driveway. Why not have a space that is dedicated to pedestrians so that they can get to the street? Granted, the street does not have sidewalks, but this is a variance that's being granted for an extended space that's going to serve as a driveway. Can it also include something for a pedestrian to have some reasonable amount, either because it's raised or somehow separated, to get out to Alicia Avenue Street, whatever it's called?
Potentially in the place of the buffering along that fence line, along the west property line, there could potentially be some sort of gravel pathway instead of landscape buffering so that it's a clear pedestrian refuge.
I'm thinking of something that gives a little bit more than that, because like a raised piece or a curb, as was previously discussed, and
extruded curb,
as a what?
extruded curb.
I don't know what that means, but okay. Because everything that we're talking about here is incredibly car-centric. We have to allow for other modes of transportation for these houses as they exit this area.
Can I say something, and then I think we're getting way into the weeds.
Yeah.
But since these are being sold as private lots, when each lot gets developed, if they choose to leave frontage between their house and the paving, that creates a natural walking area too. So a lot of times, we would see a subdivision with all that stuff already figured out. And I agree with you. I'm not trying to shoot you down, but I think there's only so many cans of worms that we can possibly get into.
No, I get that. I think it really, for me personally, single commissioner talking about this, is that the car-centric nature of our discussions of these types of things has to start to back off a little bit as we look at what people are going to be doing with bicycles or on foot or whatever is going to be happening. And since we're looking at granting a variance here in order to avoid building a whole darn street, I don't see it as that crazy.
So, yeah, and I guess it's kind of like, I guess, that's your issue. Mine is different for me, and it doesn't
Well,
matter.
I'll throw it out. We can get into discussion because we're already digging too deep in this
Yeah,
now. But
Can I take a
that is
moment to
something that
answer your question, which might answer your question?
Oh, okay.
Along the edge of the driveway, there's approximately like 5 additional feet of gravel space, and then there's the 15-foot front yard setbacks. So each one of these properties will have a substantial space adjacent to the driveway where there will not be structures, which will sort of provide a natural pedestrian refuge area.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else have questions for the applicant? Susan?
And just so that I understand the meanings of the words in practice,
Yes.
that the recommendation that I see here, 5A, if we adopt it, also means that there will be opportunity to review.
All subdivisions go through a final plat review, and so when that final plat comes in, that's when we will be checking
So,
that material.
But we don't do that.
Yeah, we don't.
Staff does.
because that won't be type 2.
Yeah, that's actually ministerial in nature.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Okay, so let's close the public hearing and close the record. Now we could begin our deliberations. So, who would like to deliberate? So I hear 2 suggestions on the table. One is for a condition that would add a 5-foot landscape buffer along the western side.
7 foot.
7 foot? 7?
And planted, not gravel,
Okay. A 7-foot,
with a curb.
this is a Christmas tree. Okay, so what I'm hearing
I'll
is
give you 3 feet of planting if I can have 3 feet of sidewalk.
No.
Okay, a 7-foot, one idea is to add a condition that says a 7-foot planting strip on the western side next to the existing neighbor house.
It would be a 6.5-foot wide landscape strip between the curbed driveway and the fence.
6.5 feet.
So it was 6-inch curb, 6.5 foot of landscape, yeah.
Okay,
The curb is just to keep car tires out of it.
right. Okay, so that's on the western side next to the existing house. Wait a minute, and the second thing that I'm hearing is the idea of a curb on the eastern side of the driveway to separate the gravelled parking area, gravelled walking area from the parking
Some form of protected space for a pedestrian.
for pedestrians.
I mean, I was looking at the western side, but if we're going to consider a buffer, that's part of the discussion as to where it might logically go.
I thought you were talking about a pedestrian separated area on the eastern side.
I hadn't placed it in a particular spot. East is to the right on this diagram, right? Yes.
Correct. Where the turnout is, where the hammerhead is.
I didn't specify.
Okay.
What I'm looking for is just a space.
Okay, so is the previous condition that I talked about, that I heard about the 6.5 foot wide, 6-inch curb?
What I understood was that in lieu of the parking, that it was proposed, that it would be a 6.5-foot landscape buffer, a 6-inch curb, and then the driving area.
Which
Yeah,
is
and
15
so-
feet of paving and 20 feet wide clear, so it would have a 5-foot gravel all along the paving.
But on the eastern side.
Not on the west side, but everywhere
the
else.
eastern
Yeah,
Yeah.
so to meet the fire requirement, they'd have to do that anyway.
Okay. Another suggestion? Did you have a suggestion?
No, I was just thinking you guys were arguing over who has the most rights, plants or people. Because we were talking about pedestrians on that side and people and plants on that
Yeah,
side
it
too.
did sound like that, didn't it?
I live on a very similar dead end, and there's no sidewalks. There's
You've lived to tell?
what's that?
You've lived to tell?
Yeah, I will tell you, you actually don't want you don't want vehicles turning down there. There's nowhere for them to equitably turn around. You would prefer the UPS guy stop on the road out front and walk down there. And if you basically have 2 or 3 houses down this tiny lane. And so it could become a problem down the road too for nefarious things to happen in an enclosed area that doesn't have access to a real street and stuff like that, street lighting and stuff like that. So, but yeah, if there's gravel there for pedestrians next to the asphalt, I think that would be wonderful.
It actually becomes a safer space if you're talking about, evening time too, because it's closer to the house as you're going by. But my principle that I'm working with on this is the idea that we can't just keep designing for cars only.
Agree. Was that, Aaron, was that the design intention? The white outside of the pavement is gravel?
No, I don't believe that to be the case. What this exhibit is showing is the building envelopes that are built out to maximum setbacks.
The setbacks.
The main drive area there, it should be pointed out, is illustrated to be a 20-foot wide driving surface. So that is illustrated to be 20 feet wide, which is meant to be paved entirely.
20 feet plus then the 7 feet for the parking?
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so this is 20 feet wide.
Yeah.
I thought
So it's 28.
something different.
So I don't think we would get, I don't think the proposal of putting the gravel on the right and the plants on the left is going to really work.
Well,
I mean.
Site designer could move things over to the east in order to get the 6 or 6.5 feet on the west side.
Yeah. Or plants could go on the left side and then they can get walked over and then it just becomes walkway. You can't put trees next to fence.
Yeah, you can.
Okay, so anybody else have any points of discussion?
I want to just reiterate that I think that because those lots, the west side, south sides, all belong to those individual lots, so the opportunity to have a gravel walking surface next to the road is easily accommodated. And if you, so I don't know, I understand the issue and I appreciate it, but I don't know if it's kind of like taking people's right away, the rights of people to be idiots and hurt themselves is my big thing. It's like I don't like designing for somebody else's ability to keep themselves safe, and I'm not talking about that in regards to children and cars. I'm talking about it in people are going to own those lots, and they can do what they want with that space and create walking surfaces.
And I hear what you're saying, and I honestly and politely disagree.
That's fine.
I think as a design element of things that we talk about here, that the vision of what the city wants to be as it continues to evolve has to start including things that we help enable.
So, I don't want to get to that. We'll have to do this on a side conversation. I'm not going to argue about it.
Because, I mean, I do want to see this. It sounds like we may have an approach that they can do it if things can be shifted a little bit, which will be up to applicant to say how they will or will not accommodate what we're talking
They
about.
can't
Well-
shift the road to the east because there's a setback for an existing garage. So the road can't move from where it is.
Correct, but
No.
I mean, we're asking for a park row against a fence for 2 people or 3 people to look at.
And they're not here tonight.
Yeah.
Well, I'm asking for a buffer for a driveway, and most of the other sections of our code would require a buffer
But we didn't here.
because it's a variance.
Yeah.
Well,
So
I think it's not, it's envisioned the way, I think it's presented the way it's presented because of a misinterpretation of what Brandon read. So the applicant believed they were on the hook to provide 4 spaces, and they chose to articulate those 4 spaces being along the fence, which I think is a terrible idea. So given what Brandon read, and that those 4 spaces are not required,
Not anymore.
then creating a buffer on the fence is functionally better, and so I think that's great. So,
Would you like to make a motion?
well, so I want to say one other thing, which is from a dialogue perspective, I would think we should remove paragraph 2, based on our discussion of the trees and their insignificance. So,
The staff condition list.
so on
Yes.
page,
Yeah,
total
number 2
page
goes.
number 33, paragraph 2, I would recommend we remove that. We had, just because of what we saw and how Amy articulated the.
And you can make a motion to that effect.
Well, I had one more
part of the
thing to
motion?
discuss,
Okay.
but you can make a motion anytime.
But, okay, if you have something,
I can take a stab at a motion.
okay.
So my motion would be to accept staff's proposed conclusion and recommendations as written on pages 33 and 34 with the following exceptions. One would be the removal of paragraph 2. The second would be to specify to allow them to remove the 4 parking spaces as proposed, given that the ordinance doesn't require them, and in lieu of that, to provide a 6-foot 6-inch buffer with a 6-inch curb along that edge. And that concludes my motion.
A landscape buffer or a buffer?
landscape buffer with mitigation trees.
So here's where I differ from,
Whose motion was it?
so my motion is as I stated.
Okay.
And now from a discussion perspective, I
Let me,
would-
let's get, you got a second
sure.
first?
Yes.
Second? You?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, to be clear, was it for a landscaped buffer?
No.
Buffer.
Okay, no. It's, so here's, just to go back to discussion, I don't think we're at a point where we should be designing what this subdivision looks like. So how sidewalks hit, what type of landscaping or not is in the buffer. I think that's for the designer to determine later. So I just think that this is not the time for that, but that's just a personal opinion.
And I rescind my second.
Okay, so we're,
Can I respond to that?
we need a second in order for the motion to stand or not stand. Okay, there's no second, so the motion dies. Okay.
Cool.
So we have no motion on the floor. Okay, Doug, go for it.
I've completely lost my train of thought.
So I want to go back to the point that if this was any other kind of subdivision, which is really what it is, it would be required to have a landscape plan and there would be a landscape buffer there. So what my goal is to have it be as close to what it would be,
Normally,
well,
or regularly.
whatever. I mean, it's like we're giving a variance for a different kind of street situation, no street. I would like to see it have some of the aspects of what it should have from a subdivision level. So I would propose Greg's, I don't want to try to say all that stuff again, but it'd be a landscape buffer. And
Add the term landscape buffer.
yes, because you're, I understand the argument. I'm not trying to be the designer, but in this case, it's a wonky proposal because it doesn't have a lot of the criteria that normally would be there, and so I'm trying to impose some of that.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm okay with landscape being added to my previous motion.
Okay.
It is now dead.
Okay, and so before I ask for a second, I would say, if you don't specify landscaping, you won't get landscape.
It'll get be gravel, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Years of experience. Okay, so
I had one other.
we have
Since we
Greg's
haven't- no.
motion, I think, back on the table.
Do it?
Adding the term landscape.
Adding the term landscaping.
buffer.
Okay, is there a second to that motion? Okay, we got a second. Okay, so discussion.
Is there a minimum to the landscape buffer in the code? 2 feet, 3 feet, 4 feet?
Well, if it was a street, it would be a 5-foot sidewalk and a 7-foot buffer minimally.
Yeah, but I was wondering where we got 6.5 feet.
Well, because I'm trying not to totally trash their project.
I
Dimensionally.
I remember what I was going to say is that I come down, I know, with what Commissioner Perkinson was saying, which is that I wasn't here to design this. I was here to suggest items that need to be included in it and look for the applicant to come back with a design that works for them. And say, is this, we believe this to be in keeping with what you're saying to grant this variance.
They don't have to come back, though. So what you're saying is you're going to make them come back with a redesigned project.
I'm saying they could.
I'm saying, how do we let's condition it so that it's done.
Yeah.
Okay.
To set the design intent.
So on your motion, is it appropriate to take their design and take out parking and add in something that we want in? Because that's not their design intention. So is that motion?
Legitimate.
It's a variance, so, yeah, you can't.
Yeah, Carrie's right.
So we could say, okay, we could say in the variance, this is basically what we're saying in the variance, then we're going to remove the parking and put in substitute landscape, okay?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And then the one other thing that I was wondering about, and I'm surprised that Commissioner Kincairn didn't bring this up, but if we're going to pull out an old, graceful plum tree, wouldn't we want to replace it with more than one on the property?
Trees appropriate to being planted in a 6.5-foot wide landscape strip next to somebody else's property. I mean, I can.
It's definitely a very much under-treed lot, too, so.
But I think, again, it's a
We've had
very
2 for 1
strange
before.
project because there's not a street, so they're not putting in street trees. I mean, there's all sorts of things that aren't happening here, which is fine. But, so you've got private lots, they're going to get landscape, they'll probably put in trees.
All right.
I don't know. I mean, obviously, I want what I want, but I don't think anybody else should be able to say what they want. Sorry, I'm being bad.
It's okay. I'm trying to do something similar, but kind of thread the needle here between what we're all talking about.
So, Doug, what I'm hearing is that from looking back to my previous motion with the addition of the term landscaping to describe the buffer, you would prefer to see additional language that the spirit and intent of which would be to call out the importance of pedestrian safety adjacent to the driveway. And so the nature of that language is what we haven't nailed down. But the spirit and intent of it is that what normally is provided with a sidewalk, in a typical street configuration as prescribed, how do you describe something that gives them flexibility to design it the way they want, but drives the importance of pedestrian safety.
The words that I used, Commissioner, were, and this isn't quite the same because I was envisioning, like a standard street sidewalk almost, but I said, a condition to be placed on the approval would be that consistent with our goal of a walkable Ashland, the private driveway be constructed to include a sidewalk space designed in such a way that all units can use it for safe pedestrian access to Leash Avenue. I don't say where, I don't say what, I'm just saying it needs to be, aspects of it would need to be such that if an unbiased individual looked at it, they could say, that's a safer place to walk than down the middle of that driveway.
So I think there's this fine line between designing for them and giving this project a way to move forward. So I get what you're saying, I totally agree with it, but if we are not specific, then we're making staff deal with that, or I don't even, when would it come back to be reviewed as honoring what you're talking about?
It wouldn't, it would get lost.
It would get lost.
Yeah. So,
That's interesting. That's great.
Commissioner Harris?
Trying to avoid specificity.
When you add a curb 7 feet in from where the property line is right now, you really narrow the pedestrian access to this. So before there was no curb and parking. So there was probably a pretty good chance there's not gonna be cars there most of the time. So it widens the road for people to be able to walk and exit the street. Now, you've narrowed the road with a curb and no walking space because of landscaping buffer. So when the car comes down, a kid on a scooter or a bicycle can't hop the curb and get out of the way.
but if there were cars parked there, it would be 20 feet wide with cars and people walking down it.
When you, if you were to poll on-street parking in Ashland, it's probably less than 50% of the spaces are used in a neighborhood like this. My neighborhood, I have this in my neighborhood. I've never seen a car parked in the 6 feet.
Your neighborhood is at the top of a mountain with a bunch of wealthy folks that have parking on their lots. These houses, I don't know. I know where you live, and I know this neighborhood.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
So we have a motion on the floor, and we have a second.
So the motion, you're referring back to the original one?
Yes.
Okay.
You have that, right?
Original one amended with the word landscape.
Jeff?
Yes. Okay. Are we done with this discussion? Everybody's happy? Sort of?
Is there an additional wording that's going to be?
The word landscape was added.
No. But Doug's proposal, is that?
He's not made an amendment to the motion, so
Okay.
I guess not.
But I'm,
Are you
Why don't we
thinking about
add a gravel path through the landscape, then you get what you want.
yeah,
Lisa's saying no.
it? Not through the landscape, eh?
Well, that kid's bike.
What, the simplest generic language is applicant will ensure safe pedestrian access. It'd be something very simple that I think the trick is in the enforcement of that.
There is no enforcement.
Well, it's the normal staff process, which, so.
but what I get from the chair is that would be lost.
Right.
They could just say the paving surface is safe.
And
Well, and I think
Go ahead.
that ties
If I
back to
may.
Eric's comment about his residence being in a similar area where there would not be a curb on the other side, which, so there's pros and cons of the curb. The advantage of not having the curb is you don't have the tripping hazard of the curb. You have a little more freedom of movement. But I think it's more traditional to have a curb, to set that aside. It's just
Okay.
Susan?
I also feel compelled to ask, access to what? Alicia Street is not a particularly pedestrian-friendly street either. It has no sidewalks. So that's not to say it's the way it will stay forever, but I think we're honestly arguing about something that is maybe commendable, but as a parent, somewhat irrelevant because I would not send my children down there onto that street anyway.
No, but you would send your kid to this short street where they could ride without cars running over them. That's where the kids are going to live. They're going to live on this street. That's where they're going to ride their bikes. Mama say don't go to the end of the street and turn around and come back.
I mean, within the property.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's what these little nooks are good for.
So isn't that something to be solved and reviewed later when the plan is proposed? And when the plan goes.
Yeah, I mean, you have a motion on the table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Clarification, please. Is a little nook a child, or are you talking about the space?
The space.
The space.
Okay, I'm going to call for the question. Do we need the motion read again?
So the motion that I currently have is that condition 2 be removed and that there be a condition of approval added that specifies removal of the parking along the western side of the property, and in lieu, there should be a 6-foot, 6-inch landscape buffer and 6-inch curb.
And I would like to amend that.
Okay. Do you want to offer an amendment?
And my amendment would be essentially what I just said, which is that consistent with the goal of a walkable Ashland, the private driveway for 210 Alicia to be constructed shall include space on the west or east side, but space designed in such a way that all residences can use it for safe pedestrian access to Alicia Avenue.
Okay. Is there a second to
I have
the
another
amendment?
Second.
Martin, sorry. You have an amendment to his amendment?
Just want to amend that the mitigation trees that go in that landscape buffer.
Okay, that's a separate amendment, so let's deal with Doug's amendment first.
Just need a second on mine.
Is there a second?
Second.
Sure.
Okay, second to Doug's amendment. And then you have a third amendment of,
The landscape buffer include the mitigation trees that are required for the project.
do you want to specify a number?
No, there's going to be a certain number of trees that, are there any mitigation
I
trees
didn't read it.
required?
There are 30 feet on center, right?
Yes, there's at least one required.
Okay, that's good, I'm good with that.
Okay.
So I would, can
Is
we
there-
have a dialogue about that?
Is there a second to Carrie's motion, Carrie's amendment?
Sounded like it was already required.
Okay, a second. So we have a third motion and second on the floor. Let's talk about Carrie's motion first.
I would just note that if what we're trying to do is create access for the fire department to those 4 lots, then planting trees along that buffer does not seem like a good idea to me. Because with time, they're going to encroach on that driveway. So I think that's a terrible idea. And so I would just offer that requiring mitigation, I think, is a great idea. I just wouldn't specify that it be along that buffer.
The problem is there is only mitigation needs to happen in the common area, and the common area includes the driveway and the space between the driveway and the fence.
Why does the mitigation have to be in the common area? Because they're showing the common area specifically as a paved area. I mean, we're amending it by pulling
Yeah,
those
you know
parking
what,
spaces out.
just think it'd be the walking surface. It's going to end up being weeds and a fence. So I was just trying to get a tree in there. I mean, I know the reality is you force a developer to do something like that, and they're going to, not that this isn't a great developer, I don't mean to be, cast dispersions on anybody, but just that tree would be actually something.
Okay, so let's have a vote on the third motion, which is Carrie's motion, as an amendment.
I'll just retract it, Lisa, just forget it.
Okay, we have one motion down. Now let's have a vote on the second motion, which is Doug's motion to amend, to add safety and
Safe pedestrian access.
safe pedestrian access. Okay.
To Alicia.
Can we get that read to us?
Sure. So what I have now is the full motion. If the amendment works,
Just the amendment.
is that it shall include on either side safe pedestrian access to Alicia.
Either side of what?
Of the private drive.
The private drive.
Okay.
So I had the private drive shall include space on the east or west side designed to provide safe pedestrian access to Alicia Street.
Works.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Let's
Aye.
I vote on my own?
So,
have raised.
You want to do a roll call?
Yeah, let's do a roll call.
What are we roll calling on, approval or just the amendment?
The
On the
amendment,
amendment
the sidewalk amendment?
Commissioner McCracken Jane. Sorry, I'm a little confused about where we are in process.
Okay.
Has the
Main motion been?
main
No.
motion been approved?
No,
For
we
approving
do
an
the.
amendment without the main motion?
Yes, we do the amendments first and then the main motion with any amendments that are
There's the amendments
adopted.
Sorry, can you read the whole thing one more time, please?
The entire motion,
No,
or just the?
The amendment.
Sure, that the
What we're
private
voting on.
drive shall include on either side safe pedestrian access to Alicia.
I meant the first part. That this is attaching to.
That's not up for discussion, that's not up for a vote right now. What we're voting on is the amendment to the motion.
Something that doesn't exist
Correct.
yet.
Yeah.
No. Commissioner Nauer.
Yes.
Commissioner Herron.
Yes.
Commissioner Phillips.
Yes.
Commissioner Perkinson.
yes.
Commissioner Kincaid.
Yes.
Chair Brennan.
No. Okay, so this motion has passed, therefore it is now part of the original motion. So we can vote on the original motion with the amendment. Everybody clear about what's going on?
I've got the process, yes.
Okay. Michael, you want to do a roll call?
Commissioner McCracken Jane.
Why don't you do it?
You wanted it read originally.
So,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, I just want to make sure I'm really clear.
Okay.
That what we're voting on right now is the original amendment with the,
It's the original motion
yeah, sorry.
without, so it's without
Original motion plus amendment.
plus amendment, yes.
Commissioner Nauer.
Let's go on.
We'll come back.
We'll come back.
You're gonna come back. Aye.
Commissioner Herron.
Aye.
Commissioner Phillips.
Aye.
Commissioner Perkins.
Aye.
Commissioner Kincaid.
Yep.
Commissioner McCracken Jane.
You can abstain if you want.
I'll abstain.
I don't know that you can abstain unless there's a,
Yeah, I said. What?
Same as a no.
Yeah, essentially.
That's how it would be reported.
Sorry?
It would be reported the same as a no.
No. Chair Brennan.
Yes. Okay, so the motion is adopted, and the type 2 decision is made. Okay. We are moving on to open discussion. Anybody have anything to talk about?
I want to apologize for being so heated. I just got really agitated in there, so I'm sorry.
I don't think there's any reason to apologize.
Well, I do. I mean, I was, yeah, I do.
Okay. Well, thank you. And so,
Strong point of view, Commissioner Kincaid, and I appreciate it.
and then our next item is to adjourn. Anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn. Second that.
Okay, all those in favor of adjourning? Aye. Okay, pass. Thank you all very much.
I did.